So I moved from the north to the south when I was like 6 or 7. Okay. And that's important because I think some of my genetics and the way that I've navigated being very candid in conversations has a very northern like hereditary perspective on it. And then the way that I've learned to build relationships and some of that is some of the Southern graces that I grew up with. And so growing up in Griffin, Georgia, which is a town south of Atlanta, if people know about Griffin, they probably just know about the college football teams and the NFL players that have come from there. And it was a public school education. You know, I had 3 brothers. I had a brother that is, or I still have a brother who's a year older than me. We were always arch enemies. And the 3 of the 4 of us, he went to MIT and the rest of us went to Georgia Tech. And I will say that an interesting part of my story is growing up, just a little bit of family dynamics led me to really have this focus on the human condition and helping to make people better, either from a health wise or from an education wise. So I was always kind of back and forth. Do I want to be a teacher? Or do I want to be a doctor? Do I want to be a teacher? Or do I want to be a doctor? And yet the Air Force, when I was in high school, they did this really fun thing back in the 90s where they would give you a test. And based on that test is what they would give you a scholarship in. And they gave me a scholarship in electrical engineering. And I said, absolutely not. Like engineers are nerds. They definitely have, pocket protectors and tape on their glass and on their glasses. And so I initially was like, never mind, I'm going into the medical space. Now in 1992 and 93 is when I graduated high school. No one knew about biomedical engineering. So I will say, had I known back then biomedical engineering was a thing, that's what I would have done because it really married my engineering brain with my passion for advancing the human condition. However, I will say that as all stories are, I don't regret my journey. My journey helped me build a lot of resilience, determination. And when I did then go to school at Georgia Tech for biomedical engineering, as a 29-year-old single mom, I was really focused on how can I drive something towards success. And so that's really how I made it to Georgia Tech. I will say that Georgia Tech completely changed my life. It really helped me see how I could be a solid leader in the space and constantly learn from people and solve real world problems with the ability to pivot when need be. Had a very abusive childhood. And so I never was really the center of positive situation environment. And I didn't ever feel like my voice could be heard in some of these sorts of things. And I knew how frustrating that was. And then once I learned and went to I don't even remember what the first place was that I saw that people were really treated like amazing and the places cared about them. And they were actually trying to develop something to help make them better. I just immediately got involved in that. And I think, maybe it's the Girl Scouts. I got my silver award through the Girl Scouts. I almost got my gold award. But so I tell people, seriously, just finish your gold or your Eagle Scout or whatever. But yeah, I just learned how it felt to serve and be served. And when it made me feel really good, I wanted to offer that to other people. And so at one point, I also learned that it also makes a big impact on business and how you can grow. Because I used to say, look, if you're going to bust tables at McDonald's, you should be the absolute best table busser at McDonald's has ever been. And that's how you can continue to grow your brand. And so then when I graduated, I think the big shift was reading the book Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard. And the topics that he had in there and starting to think about companies like Nordstrom and some of those and thinking about the experience, they saw humans as humans and they saw problems as an opportunity to make an impact that I said, I'm all in. And, most recently, my favorite book in the customer experience stage is Make Your Brand Legendary by Scott Wozniak. And it is the book that I like to give to people to say, hey, this is what you do to really make an impact. And I just know that when team members, if team members are able to give great customer service, they actually like their jobs more. So here you have those customers who are referring you and bringing in new business, and you have team members that are staying because they like what they're doing and they go home at the end of the day happy with what they're doing. So it's a win-win. capstone is what Georgia Tech calls a senior design project. And when I completed mine, I had a couple of things that fed into. And I think that I love entrepreneurs who, when I ask them, why did you become passionate to this? And it has some kind of spirit within them. And so I had a special needs daughter. I was in my last year at Georgia Tech preparing for capstone. And because of my daughter's disability, I had observed this challenge with hydrocephalus shunts that they were basically the doctors would modify the intensity of how much, and a hydrocephalus shunt is something that drains fluid out of the brain when it has excess fluid, because that excess fluid causes pressure. And that drainage, the amount that's drained and the speed at which it's drained is really important, because if you turn the hose on too much, then you don't have those fluids that are necessary to remove toxins from the brain. Okay, well, back in those days, the way that shunts happened is it was basically very symptomatic. The kid is not doing well, so you turn it up or down. And I thought, I want to create a hydrocephalus shunt that's a fully enclosed system with solenoid valves and pressure sensors and a readout. So doctors are actually not just hearing the symptoms, but they're actually seeing real data. And then I realized that at that point, when I did my senior design, every team, they just did their senior projects in their discipline, which meant that I would work with four other biomedical engineers and develop this. And I thought, that seems insane. I think in order to do what I want to do, I need someone from like computer science, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and biomedical engineering to have this fully enclosed system. And so I went to the person who was in charge of the projects, Dr. Paul Benkesser, and I asked him if I could form this interdisciplinary team. And he said, if you can talk the other departments into doing it, then you can. So I learned my first lesson in that, you know, you get an opportunity if you ask for an opportunity. The second lesson is you really need to have a compelling story and what's in it for them. And so we went to the other departments and convinced them to let us do it. Now, they made us do 3 projects and 3 papers, but come capstone, which is senior design day, our team had a fully closed loop system, and everyone else in BME said, oh, this isn't fair. She had all of this. And he said, well, she asked and you didn't. And then what I learned is that by doing that and kind of pushing the status quo, then you can also open new ideas for teams. And so now there is a separate division for the awards that are given that are fully for interdisciplinary teams that really throw that. And when I look at building companies or building other teams, I now have learned the benefit of surrounding myself with people who know things that I do not know. So I had that amazing experience at Florence, and I was employee number 4. I stayed until we raised our Series C, and they had 100 employees. And that was a great adventure. They're right at, I think, 250 employees, something like that now. And then I spent some time. One thing is that this is my story about Silicon Valley, is that I graduated from Georgia Tech. And when I graduated, keep in mind, I had a special needs 5-year-old. I had $80,000 in credit card debt because that's how I paid for most of my education. And this girl needed a job to support my family. And so that's why I selected the Medtronic job. It was safe. It was a huge company, and it was in Atlanta. But I always had an early bucket list thing. I always had on my bucket list, I'm a biomedical engineer. I love building things. I want to build a medical widget in Silicon Valley. And my analogy to country music is I tell people what happened is it's kind of like if you play country music and you think you have to go to Nashville to play country music. That's how my drive to Silicon Valley was. Now, I did not want to go until after my daughter graduated high school so she could stay in Georgia near her dad. And then after she did, I got recruited to go become COO of a biopharmaceutical company in the pancreatic cancer space. It was also a public company. So there was a lot of growth and challenges in a lot of areas. And it was in Los Altos, Silicon Valley, California. And I got out there and I learned a lot. I learned about a different type of board. I learned about how challenging it is to run a small public company with all of the financial implications that you have to tie to that. I also learned the challenges of building a company in a different area in a different state that the rules are very different between Georgia and California. And I also realized this, much like that country music singer gets to Nashville, they then realize they can do country music anywhere. And I realized I could build medical device companies anywhere. And I really had this pivotal moment where I was frustrated with the people I was hiring in California and just in my experience, my N of one, this is Angela's experience, is that I wasn't seeing the grit and determination and passion there that I remembered in Atlanta. And then I thought, well, maybe it's just me and times have changed since COVID, because this was past COVID. But I came back to Atlanta for a board meeting and some teams at Georgia Tech presented, and I saw that fire in them. And I just said, you know what? Here's the deal. I want to move back to the Atlanta ecosystem, back to Georgia, and I want to be a part of helping to make startups, entrepreneur, and technology in Georgia a 10 times more success. And so that's when we met with the last software company that I was a part of. And so I was a part of that company for a little bit. And then I was recruited to Georgia Tech and Emory for my current position running the Biolocity program.